Hello, 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 welcome. It's another great evening here in Ohio. It's Monday. It is 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and you know it's time for your good buddy Spider. And, I'm actually on time this week. The last several weeks, it's been like, skip a week, then do an episode, then skip a week, then do an episode, then skip a week, and then do an episode. And it wasn't on purpose. It hasn't been on purpose. It's just been a lot of things have gone on and forced me into like a bi-weekly schedule almost. But this week I'm here, I'm talking to you, and we've got a good topic for the people with the green thumbs out there in the audience. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to go in the garden. Let's talk about this. Now, I'll be honest first. I'll be honest. I am not myself a gardener. Okay. I am not a gardening person. I don't do gardening. I have helped people with their gardens occasionally in the past. Not too often. Like maybe carrying a heavy rock or a pot or something back and forth. Or help dig a hole or something. I'm not a gardening person. So this isn't like a topic that I personally am going to say I'm some kind of an expert on. Because I'm not. But we do have a garden here. My daughter and her mom, they run the garden. The ladies run the garden. Now, before I go too much further with that, I don't want people to start thinking that I mean that in a way that's like, oh, well, ladies run gardens and I don't because I'm not a lady. That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I mean they run the garden. They also happen to be ladies. And I don't run the garden. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's all surface. It's not a sexist remark. It's not saying that ladies belong in the garden. It's not, whatever. People can do whatever they want. You folks know me. I'm accepting and I'm open about stuff, and people can do what they want. I'm just saying, it just happens that the ladies of the house, of my house, they do the garden stuff, and I don't. Not because it's like a gender role thing. It's just how it is. I don't like to do gardening, and they do. So that's what we're doing. Now let's load up. Let's load up the good old Wikipedia here to get a baseline definition for what a garden is. Now, all you people who do gardening who are probably going to be like, what's the point? Just get on with it. But this is for people who want that little added bit of historical definition and things, right? So what makes it a garden and not just a bunch of stuff in your yard? Okay? I guess that's what I'm looking at. According to Wikipedia, a garden is a planned space, usually outdoors, set aside for the cultivation, display, and enjoyment of plants and other forms of nature. The single feature identifying even the wildest wild garden is control, and the garden can incorporate both natural and artificial materials. So that's the difference. If you just have a yard that just naturally grows flowers and things, and you just let it do what it does, and maybe you mow it every so often, I don't know. It's not a garden. It's just a yard. According to these people, you can call it what you want. You can say, "This is my front garden, man. Don't tell me I can't call it my garden." I won't. I'm just telling you what the definition is. But the definition specifically says it's a planted area, generally, that you have some control over, that you do things with. You might go out and water it every so often. You might go and weed it a little bit. You might do some transplants of the plants. Transplants of the plants, of the plants, of the plants. You do things. You have some amount of control over it. You don't let it just go nuts. Even if you let most of it kind of just grow as it wants, you at least kind of rein it in from getting outside the bounds of something, right? That's classically a garden. The garden here has gone between some extremes. There's been occasions where it's just gone kind of wild and crazy, and other times where it's been very carefully checked and tended and things like that. And that's just, some of that is up to no fault of anybody's. It's just, some years you just don't have the time to do a lot with it, and nature starts to kind of take over, and other times you have a lot of just consecutive hours where the weather's nice and you have a lot to do and you can get things done with it. Again, I don't personally deal with it, but I know how the ladies have dealt with it here. I know the time that they've spent on it. Now, gardens have been kind of part of our collective memory for a long, long, long time. I don't know if there's evidence for like the very first garden ever recorded. I don't know. I kind of doubt that anybody's going to find evidence of that, because like nature comes and goes, right? But I know it's part of our mythology. And I don't want to get super religious, because it's not a religious show and I'm not a religious person. I know some people listening probably, you do religion, and that's great. That's all cool with you. It's safe here. Nobody's going to knock each other, but I'm just going to briefly touch on that one of the oldest mythological sources, I guess, we have for gardens is the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden, if you're a religious person. If you're, and that's specifically if you're into Christianity, and I think Judaism has the Garden of Eden. It's been a long time since I read the Jewish books. So try not to knock me too much if I don't recall the specific details. I don't know if they go by the same thing in Islam and things like that. I know they have like a paradise, which is kind of like a garden, but I don't know if that's an after thing or if that was historical. I'm not as familiar with that, and I don't want to speak on it and make a mistake and have somebody angry with me for getting something wrong. So if you're interested in the various religious parts of it, then by all means, you can look into that. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of stuff. But there's also historical stuff that comes afterwards that we do have some evidence for. There's this thing, I call it, this thing. It's not really a thing, it's a topic, I guess. It's the 8 wonders, or maybe it's the 7 wonders, I don't know. The 7 wonders of the ancient world. And maybe it's 8. Maybe it's 8. And they cover different things, like the Great Pyramids of Egypt are like one of the wonders of the ancient world. They've been around so long that as a people, they've been around as long as we can remember from all of our history. Some of the wonders aren't around anymore. And one of those wonders was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And they were supposed to be these gardens that actually hung above parts of the city of Babylon. Which is pretty interesting. There's some artist renditions and things. I mean, obviously it's long gone, so there's no pictures. But, it shows that we've been doing this for a long time. And, a lot of, there's other biblical stories, again, if you're into the religious stuff, and then there's also stories of, like, ancient China and places that had gardens. Now, this was a wild one. While we're on history here. I didn't know about this. So let's take a look. In China, and there was a garden, a royal garden, which was in the Shang Dynasty, which was between 1075 and 1046 BC. So, like, BC, not even, like, close to modern times, right? And, it goes on in the Wikipedia to talk about some features about it, but the one thing that really caught my eye is it had a feature called the Wine Pool and Meat Forest. wine pool and meat forest, and that it's about as I mean, I'm not like a vegan vegetarian person, but this is kind of a kind of like kind of thing, just having this stuff out here. The description was that it was a large pool, big enough for several small boats, constructed on the palace grounds, with inner linings of polished oval-shaped stones from the seashore, and it was filled with wine. Okay? And there was a small island in the middle of the pool, and there were trees planted there, and the trees had skewers of roasted meat hanging from the branches. Just chilling. Just hanging. I mean, it was cooked, but come on, it's still kind of gross. And the king at the time and his friends and various hangers-on would drift along in their boats, drink the wine straight out the side of the boat with their hands, and then just pull down the meat from the trees and snack on it. It goes on to say that later Chinese philosophers and historians cited this garden as, big surprise, an example of decadence and bad taste. And you know what? I agree with that. That's wild. That's pretty wild. Meat forest. Oh my gosh. That's a bit much for me. Like, what about bugs and birds and just, I don't know, seeds from the trees and things just flying around? I don't know. Yeesh. Getting in the wine and the... Oh, nah. No thanks. No thank you. Oh, gosh. Now, later on, in Europe, okay, Europe didn't really catch on as, like, look at my beautiful garden until, like, the 16th century. Before then, gardening was mostly just for food. It was all crops. And there was less gardens and more, like, fields, like big fields of harvest and things like that, which were not, specifically called gardens as such. Like, if you have a little vegetable garden, that's a little vegetable garden for you. You don't have to go out and till 40 acres and plant all these vegetables. You just got this little plot, right? So, but they didn't have really gardens and things that we know of until the 16th century. And they tried to make them like everybody's idealized versions of what they thought old-time ancient gardens would look like Garden of Eden kind of stuff, right? So let me go a little bit further. It doesn't talk about like the earliest United States gardens, but I can't think of them being too much different. Early gardens for the United States were probably a lot like that, in that there were the two kinds. You had the big opulent ones with the trees and the flowers and all that other kind of stuff, meant to be just walked around and looked at, like Victorian gardens. And then you had the little vegetable gardens, along with like the big crop fields and things of that nature. Now, I don't remember which war it was, if it was World War I or World War II. Let me see here. I don't know if it lists it in the article. But they had, hey, here we go, Victory Gardens. They're called Victory Gardens, and they had them in both World War I and World War II. And the thing about that was, because a lot of materials were going towards the fighting, a lot of foods were being made into the meals for soldiers and stuff, or to feed people in the factories that had to make all the extra materials for the tanks and that kind of thing. So the government would tell people, yeah, you should use your backyards, front yards, whatever, and plant these gardens, these vegetable gardens. They're victory gardens, because by doing this, you're going to help bring about the victory for the war, because everybody's going to feel better because you got these gardens. And But it gave everybody a chance to grow their own food so that they could feed their family fresh fruit and vegetables and such, and take the burden off of the large national crops and such, right? Ooh, pardon me. And so that's the Victory Gardens. That's a thing that happened in North America, and then they had those in the United Kingdom, in Canada, and I guess in Australia, and even in Germany. On the opposite side, they did the same thing, which it doesn't surprise me too much, because all these countries were all involved with fighting each other, and so they needed to support their people. So that's an interesting thing about gardens. Now let's talk about modern gardens. Okay. Now modern gardens, you have very similar stuff. A lot of people just do one thing. A lot of people will just have like a rose garden, or they'll have a flower garden, or they'll have something like that. We have, by we I mean the ladies, they have a garden of just stuff that they enjoy. And I say that in kind of a flippant way, but I don't mean that that it's just a big jumble of stuff. They take some great care in doing that. And I think this year it's due for a big, like, major overhaul in how they're doing things. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. But they have certain flowers and plants and small trees that they like to symbolize different things. They've got some berry bushes back there. We got blackberries. We've got strawberries. We've had. I think we had some raspberries. I don't know if we still do. Blueberries. I think we got some blueberries. But we also tried to do vegetables every year. Now I like tomatoes. And we've had some tomatoes the last few years. Usually they're little small cherry tomatoes. Just pop them in. A couple of times you've got some bigger ones that you could slice into, because I like the bigger ones to put on sandwiches. I like to put the big one. And last year we ended up with not from our garden. We got a bunch of tomatoes from a family event, like a whole bunch of sliced tomatoes, and I ended up making spaghetti sauce out of those. And so we're going to try to do that this year. We're going to try to gather up as many tomatoes and things this year as we can. The tomatoes are kind of touch and go. Sometimes you get a bunch, and sometimes you don't get very many. So it's hard to say. But we're going to see if we can make our own some tomato sauce, homemade tomato sauce again, because that was a pretty worthwhile effort last year. We're also going to get some onions. I like onions. They don't really do onions so much, but I like onions, so they're going to plant me some onions. So that's nice of them. And peppers. Did some peppers last year. Some green peppers, and then some yellow, some banana peppers and things. I don't remember exactly what all kinds of peppers we got, but we're going to be planting some different things back there, and we're going to see what happens. So it's going to be, a combination. When I was a kid, we kind of had some gardens. Like, when I was a kid, our property, my parents still live there. They still live on the property. It's a big area. It's a big area, and not much goes on with it. It's just a lot of wide open space. But at one point, we had a side field that there were a lot of things planted, like green beans and corn and potatoes and a bunch of stuff. And they had this little raised area that was supposed to be a small garden, I think. We never really called it a garden, though. It was just an area where they grew asparagus and a few other things. And then eventually it got overgrown and we never used it for anything else. And they had some apple trees and a pear tree, I think. I think we tried to have a cherry tree, but I don't know if that survived. I think that got eaten up by bugs or something. I don't remember. I feel like we were trying to have a cherry tree at one point, and we called it the orchard. I think I think it used to have more trees, more fruit trees, and so it counted more as an orchard. Because an orchard is like kind of like a garden, but instead of growing like bushes and plants and stuff, it's for growing fruit trees. An orchard of fruit trees, mostly. I don't have the exact definition of it, but that's my recollection of it. My recollection. We had apples and pears. And I keep thinking that we probably tried to do cherries at one point, but I don't know if we ever got any out of it. I know we got apples and pears, and then eventually the apples just... They never quite grew right. It's like sometimes you'd get some good ones, but most of the time they didn't quite. And then they'd fall off the tree early, and then the worms would get them and stuff. Then we had caterpillars and things that would constantly attack them. I don't know if any of those trees are still out there. But I know we had the orchard, as we called it. And there were big blackberry bushes between our property and my aunt and uncle's property, which was right next door. You could walk from one to the other in like a minute and a half. It wasn't far at all. It wasn't like right next to each other like in the city, because this is out in the middle of nowhere. There's big, vast fields. But it was just right across the way. It didn't take long. So, but there were big blackberry bushes. And technically, I think they were on their property. So sometimes we'd go over there and they'd be like, hey, don't go picking all the blackberries. And me and my sisters would be like, hey, blackberries. And don't pick all the blackberries. And there was some orneriness back and forth sometimes. I feel like maybe we grew pumpkins or watermelons or something once or twice. I feel like some kind of gourd, some kind of melon maybe, melons or gourds. I don't know. The plant parts of those are very similar. Not exact. Like, you can tell one's not the other before you actually get the fruit. But the stalks of certain parts of it, if I'm remembering right. I could be way off, and somebody's going to chime in and be like, What are you talking about? There's nothing alike. This is the exact differences and science and diagrams and things that I picked up off the ground. So, but I remember them being very similar. But I'm pretty sure we got pumpkins sometimes. I don't think they ever grew quite right, but we had pumpkins. I'm just making random noises now. I don't know why. But that's what I remember as a kid. And I don't know too many other people, honestly, that have specific gardens. I know there's a lot of people here in town that cultivate bushes and plants in their yards, and they have got flowers and things. I don't know how many people specifically say, oh, I've got a garden. But I don't really associate too much with people around town. You know, I don't. I'm not going to say anything good or bad about them. I'm not an outwards person. I don't go out and hang out with people. Or go out and meet new people randomly throughout the neighborhood. But there are a couple of community gardens around here. I have not been to them, but they're places where everybody can kind of come together and plant some things. I don't know if it's strictly just for flowers, or if it's also for certain bits of produce. I'm not sure. I'd think you'd have to have certain rules on what goes where for all of that. I don't know. I told everybody I don't know much about the gardening. I'm not really a plant person. I'm not in favor of raising the whole thing and just get rid of all the plants and just have a mound of dirt. Just pave it over with pavement. No, I enjoy having plants around. Having some shade from trees and things, but I don't get into the nitty-gritty. I don't get into the specific kinds of plants. Like the ladies here, they have clematis, I think, and they have it's off the top of my head now, some wide-leafed flowering plant. But they got ferns, hostas. They got hostas. I don't know. You know, I probably wouldn't be able to tell these just looking right at them. But if you folks know what they are, you're probably like, oh, yes, the beautiful hosta. Oh, the clematis. Oh, yes. So maybe you're impressed and maybe you're not. But yeah, we got different things back there. We had black-eyed Susans, which is a flower. And we have groundhogs that live under the shed out back. They've got burrows underneath the shed. A whole generation has lived there since I have lived there. And they come out and they eat those. They eat the black-eyed Susans. Like, they just bite the flowers right off. They love them. There's tulips growing back there now that spring's kind of getting started. Ohio, it starts in it's in fits and spurts. Fits and spurts. It's warm, and then, oh, it's freezing cold. Oh, it's warm. Oh, it's snowing. Oh, the snow's all melted, and now it's 80 degrees outside. So, spring has a tough time establishing itself here in Ohio. But that's what's going on. That's gardens. And, it's a lot of work. And I have other things that I do, so I got enough work to do. I don't need to do any more. I don't need to do any gardening. But for people who enjoy gardening, it is rewarding. And we have made some pretty good tomatoes here. I will say that. We've grown some very good tomatoes. Some daisy tomatoes. So, if you are into gardening, tell me about it. Send me an email at uncannyspiritsclub@gmail.com. Leave a comment on this video once it's on YouTube, because that's where these go. They're on Spreaker to start out, and they're in various other podcast things, and then they end up on YouTube. Used to go to Facebook too, but for some reason Facebook doesn't integrate with the Spreaker platform anymore. Don't know why. Don't particularly care either. I'll just share it from YouTube if I need to. But you can leave a comment there. You can't leave a comment any of the other audio-only places. But you can leave a comment on YouTube and tell me if you have a garden, what you have planted, what would you like to plant. Do you have a dream garden? Do you have what do you like? What do you do? Tell me about it. Just because I'm not super into it doesn't mean I don't want to hear you talk about it. The other thing you can do when you do that, when you leave a comment on the YouTube, is you can like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube as well. It's Spider Does Things. Spider Does Things. That's on YouTube. Please do that. It would really help me out. I am miles and miles and miles and miles away from any attempt to be monetized, so I don't know if there's any chance in my lifetime that it'll ever happen, but every little bit will help, if you would be so kind. Okay? Okay. In the meantime, that's it. That's what I have for you. Hope you enjoyed talking about the plant life with me. Don't know what we're going to do next week. I never really know until when it happens. And then we'll see what we have to talk about, because there's always something to talk about here on Let's Talk About This, which is the best of all shows that's called Let's Talk About. In fact, it's one of the only ones that's still going on, because none of the other ones have bothered to do anything. I'm kidding. There are some out there that are pretty good. I'm only really talking about the one that every year says, oh yeah, we're going to come out this year. Oh, we're not. It's next year. Oh, we're going to come out this year. Please pay us money to do so. Oh, we're not. But we're going to keep your money. That's that other show. That's that other show. In the meantime, this has been your good buddy Spider. Get in the garden. Grow me some stuff. I want to eat it. Grow me some things. Send them to me.